Welcome to Underappreciated. We're your hosts, Cassie
and Theresa.
and we're besties who like to talk books.
And this week we've chosen young adult and the misconception that they're badly written or books solely for teenagers. And we're actually very familiar with young adult books. Both of us started our writing careers writing young adult books. We have
Mhm.
read tons of young adult books. I mean, my three huge bookshelves are still mainly young adult books.
I think so too, as I'm like looking at it. I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
most
once I
of mine
started
are
reading
young adult books too.
I was like huge with like the hardbacks and the paperbacks. And then once I started reading adult, I was like, okay, too many
Yeah.
ebooks. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we are very familiar with young adult books, and it stings every time we come across people that speak badly about young adult books, and we feel it's because they either haven't read them or they don't actually understand what young adult books are.
Yeah. Or they
So
have, a different idea of what young adult actually is or what it means.
yeah, and when people like that, whenever they criticize young adult books, I always like to think because they're always the ones that are like, oh, they're badly written or, they're only for teenagers. And then they start going on like, oh, you need to read like real literature and you need to read classics and stuff like that. But if you
Mhm.
think about it, a lot of the classics are young adult books. Like you have The Outsiders, you have Lord of the Flies, you have Catcher in the Rye, you have
Yeah.
Journey to the Center of the Earth. I mean,
Yeah.
Axel, he's a teenage narrator through the entire thing.
Hmm.
And I actually just finished listening to that audiobook and I like loved it because Tim Curry did the
Which
audio,
one?
Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Oh, I didn't know that. I love
Yeah,
Tim
so
Curry.
he's so good. So
Oh,
yeah,
man.
so and then I actually because I'm the type of person that when I'm reading a book, especially like a classic, I like to kind of I'm an like a fact information nerd, so I like to kind of like dig into like history and stuff like that. And I discovered that Journey to the Center of the Earth, that book actually inspired Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Edgar Rice Burroughs, and J.R.R. Tolkien.
Really? We
Yeah,
have
and that's a young
Sherlock
adult book.
Holmes
Yeah,
because
so
of Journey. That's
mhm.
awesome. Sherlock
So
Holmes
yeah,
is one
so
of my
that
favorites.
I've actually never read it, but I love the movies.
Oh yeah. I was like, it was interesting because I went to that writers retreat this weekend and they talked about how Sherlock Holmes is actually the number one character that's been depicted
The most.
the most. Yeah, like he has the most reiterations of his
Mhm.
character, which I found like really interesting because they were talking about real quick tangent, they were talking about how mystery isn't as celebrated as they think it should be. And I was like, mystery actually has a huge audience, like humongous. Mystery is actually my favorite genre to read, even though I write romance a lot. I like the mystery.
I
So
love my romance with mystery in it. And other
mhm.
side note, this weekend Enola Holmes just came out, the second one.
Yeah.
Oh, me and Eric watched it. I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved the mystery of it. I loved how it tied into
Would
history.
Enola Holmes also like count as a YA? Because isn't she a teenager?
I don't
Do
know
you
if they
think?
actually ever say her age, but she seems very much like she's not older than 18. So yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
I was like, I think the actress is 21, isn't
Yeah,
she? Or
Millie
maybe
Bobby
she's 18.
Brown.
I don't
No, I think
remember.
she's only 18. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't know. I always assumed that she was like a teenager. So
I mean, it would make sense because Sherlock is like in charge of her, so
mhm.
and not the mother, which is funny.
And that's huge too with our teenage protagonist.
Yeah, for sure. So that's why, like, when people kind of talk down about young adult, I'm like, do you even
Mhm.
realize what young adult is?
What it is.
Because yeah, I mean, and a lot of people don't. They think it's just dumbed down writing, or they think that it is just things for teenagers or kids, but it really is just based on the age of the protagonist in the book.
Mm,
And it's just they're between the ages of usually it's like 12 and 18, but I would say more like 14 to 18. Because then I think
yeah.
you get into middle grade territory when you go younger.
Yeah, I would say that too. Cause like a lot of people bring up the fact that like Percy Jackson is middle grade. But I
Mhm.
was like, he probably starts out middle grade, but like by the end of the series, I think it's young adult.
It goes
And
over
same
the
thing with like
top.
Harry Potter, kind of moving
Mhm.
from, and same thing with like the themes. A lot of people though, or I don't want to say a lot of people because I don't want to generalize, but like um I've heard that um now my thought process is gone. It's gone. It'll come back to me
Okay, well, talking
about
about
the age
that,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, so talking about that actually recently, I saw a video on TikTok, and this is kind of what spurred the young adult topic for me too. It was somebody who is new to writing and he's writing his first book. And he went on TikTok and was like, well, technically the character is 17, but I don't think it's young adult because it has
Oh,
adult
right.
themes. And I'm
Mhm.
like, what does that even mean? Like
Yeah.
adult themes? Because like I'm like, maybe I lived a different like teenage life than other people, but like I don't think things should be like off limit in young adult books because the teen experience is very much adult like. It's handled differently than an adult, but
Hmm.
they still are dealing with very adult things. I mean,
Yeah.
like when I was a teen, I was, drinking, smoking, cutting class, like doing all of that stuff. But I was
Yeah.
also dealing with adult issues. Like I had friends that had like, drug addictions and things like that.
Hmm.
And, you deal with death. And there's all these other, you know, big world adult issues that you do deal with as a teen. So why should that be sugar coated?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because that was something I wanted to bring up too. Because I hear a lot, especially, I mean, we're both in very different states. So like
Yes.
I was like, I hear a lot of the phrase, well, I picked up this book because I thought it was young adults, but there was so much swearing in it, or there was so much like, yeah, drug use or violence or whatever. And I was like, well, isn't it young adult if it's the age group? Like
It's the
what
age group.
classifies it as a young adult? And they some people think that young adult means quote unquote safe to read. And I don't know where that came from because I always thought young adult just meant the age of the protagonist.
And
So,
it does. And I mean, I did look it up before we started this because I'm like,
hmm.
that's what I've always believed, but I wanted to just confirm it. So I went onto multiple sites, and they all
Hmm.
say it's based on the protagonist and sometimes themes. Like they
Yeah,
say, like not over the detailed graphic sex scenes or not like overly detailed graphic like violence.
right.
Other than that, like pretty much anything flies in young adult, but it is just based on the age of the main character.
Hmm.
And to me, I'm like some of the best young adult books are the ones that like touch on those topics that may be taboo or maybe like, something that you
Hmm.
think that like an adult would go through.
Well, teenagers is all about discovery, and that means discovery of the world and your body and your sexuality and all of these themes that seem quote unquote adult, but they really are an adolescent theme
Absolutely.
because
Yes,
it's all about
absolutely.
discovering those things about you and your hormones are going crazy and like yeah, I was like you find pieces of yourself when you're going through those things. So what better way to have a book with a protagonist who's also finding those pieces of themselves, you know?
Exactly. And so like I wrote down some notes and one of them, one of the first young adult books I actually remember reading, other than like an R.L. Stein Goosebumps or Fear Street book,
Hmm.
or like Babysitter's Club, was a book called Cut by Patricia McCormick. And it was
Oh.
about a girl that cut herself. And I
Mm.
remember my friend had took it out from the library, and I think I was sleeping over her house, and I just picked it up and started reading it. And I think I read it in like the entirety of the book in that night.
Hmm.
I was probably like 12 too, so it was like I was
Yeah.
younger, but I relate like I didn't relate so much to the character, but I was so like engaged in what she was going through, and like it just seemed so crazy to me. And then 4 years later, when I was 16, I wound up dating somebody who was a cutter. And I feel like
Mm.
that book prepared me for that because I was able to understand the inner workings of it. And that book too, I read that she like did research for 3 years before she even started writing that book. So
Oh
she
gosh.
really touched on like all of like the mental health issues and the emotions,
Yeah.
everything. Like she dug so deep. And I'm like, that's not bad writing. Like that was
Yeah.
amazing writing. And it really portrayed like I felt this character. I understood
Hmm.
everything that they were going through, even though at the time I had no idea what cutting was.
Yeah.
And I think that's why young adult books, like they're so underappreciated because people think so badly of them. But it's like
Hmm.
you really need to pick up these books and read them, especially like adults that have teenagers, like
Hmm.
I think they can learn something about
Yeah,
their own kids that like on a different level that they might have forgotten or don't understand. I
I
mean, I know.
agree. And especially like ones that are written for this day and age, because oh gosh, like my kids are now teens. Like I have two out of the
Crazy.
three, and Lexi acts like one. So like um I constantly am thinking, I'm like, I was not ready to parent teenagers. I still am not ready because even just the generation gap between me and my kids, they're
Mhm.
growing up in a completely different world than I grew up in. And I that's why I really like YA written by young adults too. I don't know that many, but I think that
Mhm.
like they have stories to tell. And I know a lot of them are into fan fiction too, but like even reading like those kind of stories, you see where their mindset is, and you learn a lot about what is different about this world than it was when, back when we were in high school.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, that's every generation too. Like, it's not
Oh
just
yeah.
our generation. Like, I think there was like a gap between like me and my mom too.
Hmm.
Like, it was totally different times, and it's what's always going to happen. But I
Hmm.
also think that's probably why, I can't remember her name. You'll know it. The Duff.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Cody. I think it's
Yes.
Cody kept something. It's two K's, but I love the Duff. It's one of my
Yes.
favorites. I was
And
gonna
she
bring it
was
up.
like in college when that book came out. I think she was
Hmm.
only 20 or something
Yeah,
like
she
that.
wrote it
So,
very young. Hmm.
yeah, so she had like firsthand experience of that voice and of
Oh
like
yeah, she had
character.
a
And
handle on that for sure.
yeah, and I love that book because of that, because it
Hmm.
was so realistic.
Yeah, it really was. And it wasn't like that wasn't my experience, obviously, but
Hmm.
it was eye-opening to me because I was a very naive kid, and I read that when I was like 20, 21. And so I was like, does this really happen in high school?
We had totally different high school experiences.
Yeah, which is funny because I knew my friends were going through this, but I didn't I saw my friends, I always saw myself as the deaf, so like I didn't realize, I don't know, because there is a lot of sexual themes in that. And I was like, but fat people don't have sex because I was the deaf. So I was like, who, like, that doesn't happen. But it's interesting now, like growing up and learning, and so much more, and not being so naive, because I was like, oh my gosh, actually they're allowed to be sexual, and they're allowed to have, like, be human,
Mhm.
and that was my own self-deprecating like thing. So yeah, reading that book helped me kind of understand the meaning of how to appreciate who you are as you are, and how
Yeah.
people deal with different kinds of trauma.
Hmm.
So yeah, I love that book. That was a good one.
Yeah, that's a great one. And then the other ones that I have listed down too as books that I feel like all kids or like teenagers should read, or even adults should read because they're
Mhm.
so insightful. I don't know if you've read Lori Halse Anderson.
It sounds familiar. If
So
you
she wrote Speak, which I've actually never read, but I watched the
Yeah.
movie because Kristen Stewart was in it, and like, her
Oh,
Twilight phase, and like I'd watch anything her or Rob Pattinson was in.
yeah.
But she
Yeah.
wrote two books, Winter Girls and Twisted. I actually, like I said, I didn't read Speak, which is her most popular book, which is about a girl that experiences she gets raped, and it's like she
Mm,
kind of gets like ostracized from her friends and stuff because she like calls in like the police during a party, or if I remember it correctly. And that
oh,
was like, it was really like an intense watching the movie. And I know the
yeah.
book apparently is the same way. And from reading her other books, I can definitely get that. So Winter Girls is about a girl and struggling with an eating disorder. And her and her
Mm,
best friend were both struggling with an eating disorder, and her best friend dies from it.
mm,
And now it's her struggle of trying to overcome this eating disorder, and she's suffering from anorexia, and she's trying to
yeah.
overcome it. And you're on this like journey with her, and it's just so like, I mean, it's a really depressing, but it's also like it puts you right in the character shoes, and you understand everything that she's going through.
Yeah.
And then her other book, Twisted, it's a boy point of view, which I always do appreciate in young adult.
Hmm.
And it's basically like he was a nobody, and then he got in trouble with the law, and then he wound up like having to do community service and all this stuff, and he like gets all like built like during the summer, and now he goes back, and now like the popular girl he's always had a crush on is like paying attention to him. But it's all about
Hmm.
like the pressures of like living up to his parents' expectations and like living up to
Yeah.
his friends' expectations and like, doing what he feels he has to do to get the girl and all of this stuff. And it actually reminds me very much of Catcher in the Rye because
Mm,
he's a very flawed character.
yeah.
And at times, like, I didn't really like him, but
I
I
love those
love that.
characters.
Yeah, I love that because it's so realistic.
I'm a
Because,
big fan of unlikable characters.
yes, to me, like, nobody in like people, I like everybody, but I know everybody has flaws. So when you write a character and they're just like perfect, it's just so hard to relate to.
Oh
I
yeah,
relate
yeah.
more or less to the flaws than anything else.
Hmm.
And I think young adult books really like focus on those flaws, and I
Yeah.
appreciate them for that.
Hmm. For sure. I love you were talking about male point of views. That's why I wrote in male point of view for
Yes.
reasons. Yeah, I was like because I really wanted to focus on the teenage boy like falling in love because that's not something that they openly admit a lot because it's
Mhm.
seen as feminine, at least back. I mean, I wrote that book, oh gosh, like over a decade ago. So like I love that the world is kind of changing its view on that kind of thing, that men are allowed to be feminine and they're allowed to have emotions and they're allowed to feel
Mhm.
and do these kind of things. So I'm
Yeah,
glad that
because
the
that's it.
narrative has changed. But that was something I always wanted to focus on was while writing a male point of view was that they don't always have to be this quote unquote masculine character, that they can have both masculine and feminine qualities. And so yeah, I
Well,
like
they can
that.
have emotions too.
Yeah, I
It's
was
not
like,
all about like suppressing everything that you're feeling and
yeah.
just like, not experiencing it because
Hmm.
I mean, let's be honest, they probably are, they're just not showing it. Like,
Yeah.
they're
And when
just
you write from a male point of view, when they're suppressing emotions, you see them because they're internalized. So that's something that and then hopefully through the character's growth and everything, they're able to vocalize those suppressed emotions. But you get to actually like dive into the feeling of you know internally, and the reader can then experience those kind of things as well.
Yeah, and
So
you did that perfectly in Reasons. And if anybody's wondering, it's Reasons I Fell for the Funny Fat Friend.
yeah.
But another person who did that really good, I think, from the male point of view, it was alternating point of view.
Hmm.
I hope I don't mess her name up. Simone Elkeles, The
Oh, I
Perfect
love her.
Series.
Yes.
Yeah, she did that really well. And then
Perfect
another,
Chemistry is such a good series. I
oh,
think
I
we brought
love,
that up in the last podcast
did
too.
we?
I'm a
I
big fan.
absolutely love that series. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so good. So I think she did that really well. And
Hmm.
then I think we brought this up in the last podcast too, but Kelly Armstrong
Hmm.
in the Awakening series, The Summoning, The Awakening, I don't remember
Yeah.
what the
Hmm.
actual name is. But the one character that he's going through like all those changes and everything.
Yes. I love him so much. His name is Derek.
I was gonna say, I think it's Derek. I'm like, I don't want to mix him up with the brother. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Simon.
he's
Hmm.
going through like the hormone changes, but I mean, obviously
Yes.
he's like,
And she brings up that he has acne, that he
yes,
stinks. like
yes,
and you're introduced to him thinking, oh my gosh, is this gonna be like the gross like older brother of the hot guy or whatever? And it turns out to be just so different.
yeah. It's like in the beginning, you're like, I don't know if I can actually like him because he's kind of gruff too. Like he's
Yeah,
just like, yeah, and he's the
very
quiet
gruff,
type.
very quiet, and kind of aggressive a little bit.
Yes,
And yeah, she brings up, yeah, and then of course physically, quote unquote, physically flawed, but really that's, I mean, I look at my teenage boy right now and I'm like, oh, that's it right there.
that makes sense. Yeah,
Big
it
and
feels
tall
like
and
it was so realistic to like what teenage
Yeah.
boys actually go through, like with like
Yeah.
the voice
Even though
changing
it
the
you
skin
you
and
come to find out it's enhanced because of his supernatural
yes.
ability. But oh,
I appreciated her so much
I
for
did. I really
including that.
appreciated the highlight on that and to make them a love interest, like a
Yes.
potential love interest. I won't spoil anything else, but
Yeah,
like a
there's a
potential
triangle.
love interest by the end, you know? So, oh, I love that series. We're going to talk about this series, I
We have to
think.
talk
Yeah.
about that. I want to
Yeah.
reread that series just so we
Me
can
too.
talk about it.
I was like, that's a good, I should have done it for October because I was doing my spooky ones for
Oh
October,
yeah,
but I
that would have
didn't
been
do
a
that
great
one.
read.
Yeah,
And
that one was good.
spin-off series, but that's okay. That's another podcast. So
Yeah. I wanted, if you're okay, I was like to shift gears a little bit. Because I wanted to talk about like an experience I had at the library. So I hadn't been to the library in a long time, and um I went to grab some spooky books because I don't own a ton. So I went to grab some spooky books for the month of October. And I really love R.L. Stein. So I went immediately to the teen section
yeah.
of the library. And I found it interesting actually, because I asked a librarian there for a TikTok. I was like, how many adults actually go to the YA section? Like they beeline it to the YA section. And she said, not a lot proudly go over there. She says a lot of people will like circle the library a couple times and then like check over their shoulders and then go over there. And some will check out and say, oh, it's for my daughter or whatever. But it doesn't matter. And I'm like, I think that's so interesting. Like, why is YA something like older generations
Be
are
ashamed of.
ashamed to like or
Yeah.
appreciate? Like,
And
why is there some sort of like what's the word? Like, it's not
like why is
like
it so taboo? Like
yeah, I was like, why is there such a negative view on liking books for teenagers? And
yeah,
so
that
that I just thought that was interesting.
and you know what's really interesting too, because before we came on here, like I said, I looked up what young adult is actually defined as or whatever.
Hmm.
And one of the things actually said that even though they're, teen protagonists and technically they're written for teens, the majority of young adult readers are adults.
Oh yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
I was
So it's
like,
so
I believe
funny
it.
that like people are like, yeah, no, I don't read them.
Yeah.
And
Like
there's nothing wrong with it. I mean,
there's nothing wrong with it.
I love, okay, so the reason like I love young adult, so when I started reading it when I was younger,
Hmm.
obviously, and then like even well into my 20s, I had no desire to read adult books. I mean, it's different
Hmm.
now. I fell into that whole like romance thing and like obsessed with that, but
Yeah.
um I wasn't ready to really like let go of my teen years. And
Hmm.
I feel like going in young adult books, it kind of helped me like kind of stay there for a while and
Yeah.
to experience that again. And I feel like that's why I clung to them so much because in my early 20s too, like all the adult books, it was like people getting married and having kids and so and like to me that was just it seemed so far off. I mean, I know
Yeah.
about like totally different like lifestyles and everything. I'm gonna be 38 in a month and I'm engaged, still not married, no kids. So I like held on to that for a long time of like, well, I don't relate to somebody
You
who
had
says
that in your bio for a long time too, didn't you? That you write young adult because you want to be one
yeah,
or something like
because I
that. I
want to
can't
relive
remember,
the
but it
best.
was cute.
I said I want to relive the best and the worst years of my life.
Yeah.
Because there were some of the worst
Yeah.
years of my life, or at the time I thought they were the worst years of my life. But and I think that's why I loved young adult so much, is because I got to relive all of that.
I
I mean,
think so. I have a kind of a theory about our specific generation, so millennials, because young adult became so huge when we were young adults. It was like, or maybe it just felt that way. But to me, like young
no, no,
adult
for
became so
sure.
huge with Twilight, with Hunger
Yes,
Games, with Harry Potter going into the young adult years. Like we just got a slew of young adult books, and we didn't want to move on to adult books. And I have a theory that that's why new adult was created, so that
yes.
we could transition smoothly into adulthood
I
as readers. Uh,
100% agree with that.
yeah, I was like, because new adult fun fact, I launched the Random House new adult line, which was super nerve-wracking. And
Mhm.
they bought me not because I had a book, but because I had a young adult book. So not because I had a new adult book, but because I had a young adult book that they really enjoyed my voice of, and they are like, "Can you make a college one instead?" And so and I think that was like, and that was back when new adult became so huge. I think, you think of Cora Cormack, hers came
Yes.
out and that was really big. Colleen's Slammed series was really big back in,
Oh yeah.
2013. There was Abby Glines
Rachel
that
Van
went up.
Dyken.
So all these quote unquote new adult books, but like they said new adult because of the age. Like
Yes.
I want to say that those are actually adult books. I was like,
Agreed.
um if we didn't have new adult, they would be
They would have
solidly
been,
categorized
yes.
as an adult book because of what was in them, and because they wanted to transition all of the young adults millennial fans who were like, I don't want to read an adult book about my mom. They're like,
Yep.
oh, we have new adult, these are actually your age, they're 20s, early 20s, and this is what they are. And so I think that's why new adult became so huge when it did.
See, that's an interesting theory because I totally see that. And I mean, like you, I had a young adult book and
Mm-hmm.
I got a publishing contract with Penguin, and they were hesitant to give it to me. And they said, can you turn this into a new adult book?
Right.
And I was like, yeah, like I can just, instead of high school, they're in college. Like I can do that. And then for me, the one thing that they
That's a
insisted,
great book, by the way.
no,
I'm falling for my ex. Yeah,
yes.
that's what it's called. Yeah.
So that fun fact was the first sex scene I ever wrote because that was the only way they would give me a contract was if
Yeah.
I made it the characters in college and put a sex scene in. And
Hmm.
I think that actually holds up with your theory that it was like guiding young adult
Yeah.
readers to adult books because it was like, okay, look, these books have the romance that you like in your young adult books, but they're a
Hmm.
little spicier.
Yeah. Like
And
grow
now,
up
like,
with us, like
yeah,
let's all
exactly.
let's all grow up.
And I remember how like panicked I was to write one. I mean, now that's all I
Hmm.
write, but back then it was like my first one. I remember my mom's advice was like, just don't be a prude.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Don't be a prude. Just go for it. We probably
Right.
should do an episode on new adult too, because I think that there's
Oh, for
still
sure.
this kind of stigma around new adults being just sex books.
Just sex books. And you know what? I really hate that because I think the
Yeah.
college experience is something that really,
It's more than just sleeping around. Like it
oh,
really
for
is.
sure. There's so much more that goes on during that time. And
Yeah.
it's like really like when you're finding yourself and like,
Hmm.
you're still bordering that line of being a young adult and an
Yeah.
adult, which is, exactly what that category is. And yeah, so
And yeah,
agreed.
adult books are wonderful for people. I love that most adult characters are so more like confident in themselves. So like it's something to like I always like think, oh, that's something to like when I grow up, I want to be
Yeah,
like even though I
exactly.
am grown up, like they're a
Hmm.
little bit more sure of themselves, but they still have some learning to do.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think
but that,
that's why New Adult was created anyway, in my
yeah,
own
well,
opinion.
and I mean, in the new adult category, I mean, it was self-published authors that created
Hmm.
it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that'll be a really interesting topic. And I mean, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but like Colleen Hoover is like really the one that created it.
Oh, for sure. She with Slammed. I love her telling her story of Slammed. And if you haven't heard it, you should look it up or anything. But she talks about how she didn't know how you got published. She thought how you got published was you put a book on Amazon and agents find you. And if you're Colleen Hoover, yeah, that's what happens. But that's not, I was like,
Yeah,
that's
well now,
not
but back then, like when she was like
right.
just
Yeah,
starting
back
out writing
then.
her first book,
But
yeah,
it turned out, I mean, because her writing is so fabulous, but like,
yeah.
yeah, it turned out really well for her. She's not underappreciated at all.
No, well,
She,
you know what? There's been a lot of hate going around, but I feel like people just like to hate just to hate. But regardless of
A
her
lot of people
writing.
hate when it's hugely popular. I
Yeah, and
mean,
I
I
think,
don't hate, but I actively avoid hugely popular things. But
yeah.
that's just because I don't want to get on the train.
Well,
Sometimes I need to though. Like
yeah, you know what?
they're well-deserved trains.
Exactly. But that's funny because like with Laurie Hulse Anderson, her most famous book is Speak, and that's the
Hmm.
one I haven't read. And then like I've read a lot of John Green, and I
Oh yeah.
have not read
Fault.
Fault in Our Stars.
Yeah.
I
That's
have read
the only one I've read of his.
the only one of his I have not read.
Yeah.
Wait, yeah. No, have yeah, right? Okay. My
Have
brain
you, I was
like,
like, have you read Looking for Alaska? And
I
because those
did.
are young adult. I think all of his are young adult. Yeah. And they
Well,
deal with,
yeah. And
I
they're huge
remember the big
too.
thing in Looking for Alaska was the banana scene. I've
Yes.
never read it, but like that was something that went like around. They're like, this isn't young adult. And I was like, how is that not young adult?
Oh,
Because
it's totally all of
that
his
is
books.
completely young adult,
Yes.
like teaching. And
Yeah,
if you
all of
haven't
his
seen what's it called? Eighth grade. Have you seen that one?
no.
And is his name Bo Berman? I can't remember.
I
But
know the name.
yeah, he directed it and wrote it, and it's a great movie, and it's all about eighth grade. And there is a banana in there when she's like, I don't know how, and her dad walks in. It's so funny. But yeah, it's awkward, and that is teenager brain.
Absolutely. Yes. And see, and that's why when you go back to like young adults badly written, it's not
Hmm.
because these authors are able to like create that awkwardness of that age and like and
Yeah,
that's why I think adults go to it so much because it's
yeah.
like they can remember that time, of like that uncertainty and like that like,
Hmm.
just not
Oh, and I think
being
some of the
sure.
most beautiful written lines are in our young adult books. Like I think about all the quotes that are in Harry Potter, for instance, that have people have tattooed on them. Like
Yes.
there are so many beautiful quotes in young adult books. And um
Well, even
like
Sarah
the
Dessen, I mean, she was
yeah,
like my favorite young adult author. I can't believe I haven't brought her up yet.
yeah.
Her some of like the thing, it's just like the writing's just so like poignant and like it really like touches you on like a deeper level, I feel like, and it's like you really feel for the characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And,
And
yeah, the
I
writing.
think it's such a talent to be able to write such poignant things in a way that is understood
Yeah.
by a teenage brain. So like, and not that they're like dumber or anything, they're just more naive of the world. And
Hmm.
so like to have that talent is just incredible. And I started, well, one of my favorite authors, and it's not, I love the series, but it's not her series, it's her writing style that I fell in love with. And that was Tahara Mafi, who wrote the Shatter Me series, because that the way that she wrote her prose, it was so off kilter, like, and so different than you would see. And it was beautiful though. It really spoke to me, and it's not for everybody, but I think that she's one of the top talented writers I've ever read, and she's strictly young adult. So
And I've heard that about her, and I have yet to read her books. And I think I actually
uh,
have Shatter Me somewhere on my shelf. I've
I
read her
think it's
husband's books,
gorgeous the way that she writes.
and I'm like scanning my shelves to see if I have it.
I have
Um,
all of yeah, I have all of those. Those are my favorites.
I feel
and
like I have
and the
Shatter Me.
story, like the story is good, but it was the writing that pulled me in. And there is very rarely, like, I am always a story over writing person. And so
Mhm.
like very rarely does that happen, that I was so entranced by the way things were written. And she was one of those ones that I was like, why is that so popular? It's so popular. I'm not going to get on that train. And then I did.
Recently too, right? Because those books have been out for a while.
Yeah, that one came out when I was queering. So,
Yeah. Because
yeah.
I follow her on like social media just because I love her style. Like,
Hmm.
And she would do like
She's
photo shoots
cute.
and stuff like that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Like so I followed her for that. But I knew so many people that loved her books and would talk about them.
Yeah.
But her husband, I read the first two books in his series, Miss Peregrine's Peculiar Children. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
totally messing that up. But those were good
Yeah.
too. And I mean that made a great movie. I actually love that movie.
Power couple.
Yes. Oh, for sure, for sure. I think they're like the Beyonce and Jay-Z of like the young
Yeah,
adult
the
world.
book world.
Yeah, for sure.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely. And I love that like he created that entire book series just based on like antique photos that he found and he was just interested by them and then he just like,
Hmm.
created that entire series around it and it's just those are like really good books and it's a
It's funny
great
where our ideas come from.
yeah, I know like anything can like spur something.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I still actively look for young adult, even though it's not like my top choice anymore, but I still actively go out and look for young adult books, especially by authors who aren't as big, you
As
know.
well
I
known.
I would love to I would love to have just like an indie author list of young adult books and
To
read
check
them
out.
all. Mm-hmm.
Yes, for sure. Like if anyone has Rex, like let us know.
Mm-hmm. I would love to make a list and just read them through because yeah, I wonder if people like if they automatically think that if you have a traditionally published young adult, then you're like automatically popular, or if that's
Yeah,
like, because
not the
that's not
case.
the case.
Not the case. Most traditionally published authors are unknown
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and they're fighting the battle. I mean, I think we can have an entire podcast about like indie authors and versus
Hmm.
traditional authors and that whole
Yeah.
thing.
It's
Because there's
not all
so
what it
many,
is. It's like
yeah,
we've both been indie and traditionally published, and so we kind of have an idea, I guess. We don't kind of have, we have an idea of
yeah, we're pretty well
what it
versed in
is.
that. I mean, I said like when I was traditionally published, I say I'm like one of the forgotten ones, one of the lost ones, because
Hmm.
if you don't have one of those big advances,
Yeah.
they're not taking a gamble on you that much. Like they give you like
Yeah.
your advance and you know, as long as it's not like breaking their bank, like they don't care. It's just putting a book out there. So if you
Hmm.
aren't,
Yeah.
you know, getting that massive advance, you're not going to get the love and the appreciation that you deserve.
Hmm. That's true.
That's a whole other podcast though.
That sure is.
Yep.
And
But
there
there,
were several books, written by our critique group people that
yes.
were published and they were young adults and they just never got the attention that they should have, I think, in my opinion anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
And
There's
of course that comes from a biased point of view because I love these people and I know them in real life. But I honestly I love them because of their writing. Like that's how I was introduced to them, and then they turned out to be awesome people. So
yes. And we're very lucky with that too.
we are, yes.
Because
I
there's
always
like
tell people that.
yeah, like there's like writing groups and like you always hear about all this drama and like all of this stuff. And I'm like, we have like a group of, I don't know, six or seven of us.
Yeah, there's quite a
Yeah.
few of us. Hmm.
And like we no drama at all. We're always like rooting for each other. I
Yeah.
always want the best for all of them. And like I love every single one of them.
Hmm. And
And
not
yeah,
all of them are actively writing anymore, but they're still, our cheerleaders. And
yeah,
it's nice and we're all on our different journeys too. Like you and me split off to do, focus on indie romance and
yes.
everything. And of course, Jade went off to write her dark series and become like a millionaire. And
Yeah. Which I'm like, I don't even think we could say her real name, but like
right. Yeah. I was like, now that I
yeah.
said Jade.
Yeah. I'm like, I know who you're talking about. Most people would
Yeah.
probably be shocked. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah. She's
go.
huge now. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
she's like Colleen Hoover status now.
yeah, I think she was Colleen Hoover status before Colleen
Colleen.
Hoover
Oh, for
was,
sure.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, but then
And
like I think of like going back to like young adult, like
yeah.
Lizzie's book.
Oh, Lizzie Charles. Yeah.
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 Is that what she published
Hers
under?
did
Because she
so
has
well.
she had two names. Did she publish under Lizzie Charles? I should know this.
I think she published under Lizzie Charles.
Okay, because her book, I remember reading that book.
Yeah.
And I read it for pleasure.
Perfectly Messy, I think is what it was called.
Yes. Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So
it
good.
did really well. Yeah, it did really well for the publisher that it was with. And yeah, it was so cute and so good. And that's a good one.
Yeah,
Perfectly
I loved the
Messy.
writing. I loved I really connected with the character on that one. And then there was the
that
struggle.
was a good male character. Like
Yes.
he was written completely different than the typical male character that you see in any, whether it's young adult or adult. So yeah, especially for the time. So, and it was published in 2013. Yes.
2013 or 2014. That was around the same
it was around the same time as Nerd.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another great book. Another underappreciated author. She was so good.
She was. And I'm like, has she published anything lately? I don't think she has. I think she moved to she's more on her blog now, and she's running a self-help stuff. Yeah. And so, and then Kelly also published a lot of fantasy, and she had a couple that were out.
Yeah, and I am not a fan of fantasy, and I loved her books.
Oh, her books were so good.
Yeah, that like one scene where it's like the girl, she was like in a cage or whatever, and there was all that like, stuff exploding, and so good.
Yes, it was so good. And we all started writing young adults, and I think we've all kind of moved to different kind of things, but we all still love and appreciate young adult, and we all still like talk about it. And I mean, all of their books are still published too, so and again, all of them underappreciated, like for sure.
And
Rachel's, yes, all of
I'm not going to try to say her last name.
It's Shufflebine.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
It's not Schiefelbein.
No, it's Shufflebine.
I've been friends with her for like a decade, and like stayed at her house.
Yeah. I was saying it so wrong for so long, but she corrected me last time, and I was like, I will remember.
I can't believe all this time. Wow.
Yeah, I thought it was Schiefelbein, but she's like, no, it's like shuffle, like shuffleboard.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow, so that helped. Tangent.
Yeah. We totally went off there. But no, it's just that like,
and she's a photographer. She did shoots for both of our covers. She did my entire how-to series, and she did your Prove Me Wrong.
Yeah, my young adult book, which is about a teen mom.
A teen mom, and that's a good one too. And Theresa publishes young adult under Tessa Marie, so you're gonna have to look her up because all of hers are so good.
It's funny,
all of your YAs.
It's been so long since I like read them. So I like
they're so good though. That's how we got together was through YA.
YA is what brought us together. It was our YA books that brought us together. And I mean, it's
absolutely
like the best I've had. Like
that's why I asked you to write with me, because I read Rocky Road. I don't know what it's called now. Dead Girl. #Dead Girl. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just Dead Girl. Yeah.
Yeah. I is it just Dead Girl?
Yeah.
You changed it?
I did the hashtag because
oh yeah. Yeah, so I I still call it Rocky Road because that's what it was called.
All of my books like by what they were originally.
Yeah, what they originally were called before title changes. Sometimes we're forced into title changes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so I loved that book. It was so good. And after reading that, I was like, maybe she'll write one with me. And you did. So.
And it's funny because like I wrote young adult for years, just like you did. And I don't think I could write it anymore. Like, and that's
you say that. I bet it'll come back to you real fast.
See, I don't know. Well, I mean, I did put flashbacks in my one book when they were like
younger, and it was so good. I still remember because I told you to put flashbacks in.
You did, and I was like,
I usually advise against it as an editor. I'm like, don't put your flashbacks in, keep the story going. And I said, put your flashbacks. Oh, it was so cute. They were
And
so
it
good.
actually like reminded me of writing young adult, because
Mm-hmm.
it had been so long. But it's not an easy thing to do. And that's another thing that I think
Yeah.
that young adult authors, and we've kind of touched on it earlier, that they don't really get the credit for that because they can really tap
Yeah.
into that, like, teenage brain, which it's a
Mm-hmm.
complicated, like,
And
mess.
like we were talking about generation gaps between, I mean, you don't have to use slang or anything like that to relate to these kids or even be one of those kids, but to know these kind of things, to know what the high school is like and what,
Well, because
yeah,
no
the
matter, like,
world is.
yeah, even though like generation gaps, like all of that stuff, and like, we're growing up in different times, the experience as a teenager for the most part is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to figure out who you are in the world, like
Mm-hmm.
how you fit in, like all of these different things. And I think the basis of being a teenager is the same across the board in every generation.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's not easy, but it's so easy to relate to a teenager in a young adult contemporary and a teenager in a young adult fantasy because yeah, because of those things. The
We've all went through those stages.
yeah.
And I think that's why young adult books are so relatable as well, because once you get to the adult books, everybody has like very different adult experiences. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's when it starts to change, and not become
Yeah.
as relatable. But in young adult books, there's still that piece that every single person can find a piece of them in
Yeah.
those characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because it, like I said, it is, they all have kind of the same experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we held on to it for so long.
Oh, for sure. I sometimes like, oh man, I wish I look at my kids. And a lot of times though, I look at my kids and I'm like, I don't know how you guys deal with what's happening in this world. But
Mhm.
then I think I'm like, I wonder if my kid or my parents thought that about me. Like, how do you deal with this kind of thing? And you when you grow up in it, it's just but I also look at them and be like, I wish like I didn't have the adult responsibilities that I
Responsibilities.
do
Yeah.
now. And
Well, it's funny
yeah.
because I say things now that my mom would have said about me as
Oh,
a teenager, and I don't
all
even
the
have
time.
kids. And I'm like, I just opened my mouth and my mother came out. Like,
Uh-huh.
what was that?
The older I get, the more my mom comes out of
Yeah, the
my
more I sound like my
yeah.
mom, exactly. So I think that, even though we say we don't understand teens today, like we do because we were them.
Mm,
It's just that, like, we've gone on and had different like experiences and experienced the world and life and, adulthood.
mm.
So it's like changed our perspective on everything.
And sometimes you just gotta like sometimes I need to put down the adult book and pick up the YA one and live vicariously for a while.
Exactly. Absolutely. And yeah, that's why I'm like kind of excited. I want to go
Yeah.
back and reread those Kelly
I
Armstrong
can't
books.
wait until Lexi, because my boys, they don't care. But I was like, Lexi will I think she will. I would love to just I can't wait till she's at the age where we can read books together,
Together.
YA
Yeah.
books together. And yeah, and with
But see, and it's such a great experience to have with like, your daughter,
your
and
own
like for
kid.
her to
Yeah.
have with her mom. Like, and it opens up, and again, young adult books, like so many, like a broad range of topics. And it's like
Mm,
you can like help like open up the door to conversations that you might not necessarily have
absolutely.
had.
Like, mom, I don't quite understand this. What does and it does. It opens and what better way to learn it? Because I always tell my kids, I would rather you learn these kind of things from me and from
Mhm.
dad than whatever they're passing around
Oh,
at
come
the
on, give
school.
Josh some credit. I thought
Yeah.
you said and Josh,
I
or
said and dad,
oh, I thought
not
you
dad.
said and not Josh.
And not dad. No, no, and dad.
Leave Josh
Learn it
alone.
from me and dad and not at the school.
Yeah, for sure.
In the hallways.
I know. Well, it's funny because now I think back to some of the things that I learned when I was a teen, and I'm like, they thought they knew what they were talking about. They
It's
didn't.
like the podcast listeners can't see your face there, but it was pretty epic.
Like the shut. Now that I'm actually thinking back to it, oh my god! Like,
You're
oh,
like, oh no.
yeah, yeah. Kids, they, yeah. Like I remember, when I found out what sex was. It was actually in first grade from someone that I was sitting next to. And now that I think back to what she said, I was like, that no, that is
No,
not
that's
what it
not
was.
right.
And I believe her.
Uh,
So yeah,
we
and
had
that's
one kid who was like for serious thought that sex was when a boy puts his part in a girl's belly button.
what, because like a mom's pregnant, like and it's the stomach. Is
Yeah.
that what?
And
Yeah, okay.
he was like 14, 15, still
Oh wow, was
believing this.
adamant about it.
Yeah. I'm like, let's go to health class.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's just but and you know what? Which is I don't know if you've ever read it, but Forever by Judy Blume. Did you ever read that?
No, I was
So
like, I know of it. Yeah.
I read it like a couple years ago because I mean that book was like it like crossed boundaries when it came out because
I
it came
was
out in
gonna
like
say,
the
is it
70s.
on the banned book list?
Oh, for sure. At least back
Everybody read
then.
whatever is on the banned book list.
Oh,
Like,
I
that's
yes,
just
I can't
something that
recommend
needs
that
to
enough.
happen.
Definitely read banned books because that's how you like really learn things. But yeah, it was banned because it came out in the 70s and it was a romance and it was a
Yeah.
girl and she was having sex with her boyfriend and like that was just unheard of because she was like 16 years old or something like
Mm,
that. And
yeah.
but it's such a good story because it explored like every like the emotions that you're going through and like, that first
Yeah.
love and like, he's the one and all this stuff that like, you go
Oh
through.
yeah. You
Well,
make those decisions without, yeah, thinking about
exactly. And
anything in the future. Yeah.
and it explored all of that. And I think that is a great book. And any teenager should be able to read that to
I'm gonna put
understand
that
like,
on the list of things. Lexi tells me all the time. She's like, what book should I read? What book should I read? So she's into horror, though, stuff. I can't wait to share some
oh,
horror stuff with her.
it's funny. I would think that she'd be scared of that.
Yeah, she's a psychopath. But
I'll
she's
take her
cute.
in. Well, you got to get her into like R.L. Stein,
Lexi
obviously.
is my 9-year-old daughter, by the way, just for
Yeah,
some context.
she's 9 going on 16.
Yeah, 9 going on 16, and I have a 14 going on 40-year-old
Yes.
too. He likes reading history books because he's an old man.
Hey, I love history books. I've been reading them since I was his age.
Yeah, that's like literally all he reads is nonfiction, like how-to books and history books. Like that's what he loves. So
I'm gonna next time we're on the phone, on speaker in the car, I am going to ask him what he's reading and what I should read.
yeah, he'll probably tell you like a weapons book or something like
Oh,
that.
okay. So
He
he's
loves.
into like a
Yeah,
okay.
right now he's reading like weapons in different historical or like different wars and when they were made and how like they have like the 3D, not the 3D, like the skeleton image of a gun so you can see like the inner workings of different
Okay.
historical weaponry that they used in different wars and stuff. It's quite interesting, but I mean it's not my cup of tea, but he loves it.
Yeah. No, it's
So
right. Like I was actually kind of into like the military fighting style with like the ring,
yeah. And I think that
all that
comes a
stuff.
lot with his gaming stuff like that. He's very interested, like, in because he plays Halo and he plays all those things. So,
Mhm.
and him and his dad talk about that. Teenagers, they're great. They need awesome books.
Yes. But you can learn a lot about history in some of these books too, because I mean that's what a lot of
Absolutely.
them are
Yeah.
based off of. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
you think of like Game of Thrones and everything, and that's
Yeah.
based off of like military warfare back in like the, Roman
Same
times.
with The Hobbit and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very strong military themes, undertones, and all that.
Hmm.
So yeah, you can learn a lot about history. Books are great.
I think we've touched on everything
Yeah, I was gonna
that I
say we
wanted
can probably
to.
wrap it up if we want.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
was
I
like,
think that
how long
was,
have we been going? I don't
I don't
even
know. I
know,
feel like we went on a lot of tangents too. So like I
but that's
apologize
okay.
for that.
Yeah, we're
We
a
kind of went into
tangent.
like multiple areas, but that's like what you're gonna get with us on this podcast.
That's true. Yeah.
We like, well, at least me, like I like to babble and like it's just like a roller coaster that's very twisty that just kind of goes all
Well,
over the
and that
place.
comes with passionate topics, though. When you
Mhm.
come with passionate topics, you're gonna go all over the place, but still have, yeah.
At the heart of it, this was definitely a young adult conversation and why
Yes.
it is underappreciated and why if you have ever hesitated to read a young adult book, stop. Just go and pick it up and just read it.
Hmm.
Don't be ashamed and don't be embarrassed because
Yeah.
people that criticize young adult books probably have never read young adult books or have
Hmm.
don't realize that they have read young adult books because like I said,
Yeah,
all of those
exactly.
classics
Go
that are
to the library and you beeline it to the young adult section
Mhm. And I
with no
guarantee the
shame.
librarian would love to talk to you about all of it too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Mhm. And we're
I
gonna
love
come on
talking to
here,
librarians. Do that too.
yeah. And then we're gonna come on here too, and we're gonna talk about, obviously this is underappreciated, so we're gonna talk about underappreciated books,
Hmm.
specific books, and authors. So I know there's gonna
Yes.
be a bunch of young adult ones thrown in here, so
Uh-huh.
stay tuned
Yeah.
for those because, as you can tell, we have a lot to say on them.
Yeah. I was like Kelly Armstrong because she's
And I'm
definitely
like,
on the
I'm
list
excited to
now.
reread that series.
Yeah.
So good.
So, yeah. So we
Okay,
good?
well,
Yeah.
I
All right.
think we'll wrap it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we will be posting these, I think, every other Monday. That's when we decided to do
Mhm.
this. So keep an eye out and you can follow us on wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks for listening and happy reading.
Happy reading.